Are you ready? Buckle up. Oh, I missed you guys, by the way. Oh my goodness. So this month, as Dr. Peter said, yes, we're talking about our family of origin. Don't you just love that? Are you scared? I am. So, I love this image. It's like, get on the bus. We're just going to get on this bus and we're going to go from fantasy to freedom. We don't know what it looks like. We don't know where we're end up, but we're willing to get on this bus and see where it takes us, right? So last week, Dr. Petra gave this incredible, powerful message. If you were here, I wish I was in the sanctuary so I could have felt the sanctuary. If you weren't here and you haven't watched it, I really encourage you to watch it. And she talked about the reckoning. And so today we're moving from the reckoning to the rumble. The rumble. Get ready to rumble. So when we rumble with this thing called our family of origin and the stories we tell about them, and maybe perhaps the stories we've been telling about ourselves because of our family of origin, it impacts perhaps every single relationship in our life, including the one with ourselves and everyone that we're close to, whether they're in our family or not. So I know that we work on these things, but we got to keep working on them. I don't know that this thing called the family of origin and all of the roots and all the tendrils and all that is ever really taken care of. I trust it is, but at least for me, I'm still working on them. So we're just going to work on them together, and we're going to go deeper and deeper today. In this brilliant book called Rising Strong by Brene Brown. So she talks about the rumble as it relates to the reckoning. And the reckoning is how we walk into our story. That was the things that Dr. Petra talked about last Sunday. That all the ways in which we walk into this story. Well, the rumble comes when we own it. So we've got to own these stories. We've got to wrestle with them. We've got to rumble with them. And owning our stories means reckoning with our feelings and rumbling with perhaps some of our dark emotions. Our fear, our anger, our aggression, our shame, our blame. And perhaps, and sometimes, this isn't easy. It's not for wimps. It's not easy. It's scary at times. And it means that we're moving into this unknown place, and that takes courage, and it takes bravery. It takes courage and it takes bravery to say, all right, I'm going to rumble with my family of origin stuff. But there isn't an alternative. I guess there is. We can continue to deny our stories. We continue to be disengaged from our emotions. We can continue to let patterns that we may not even know run us over and over and over again. We get to bring them into our now present family, the future families, and by the way, all the ones coming after us, long after us. Or we can choose to live our own life, rumble with these things from our family of origin. And when we decide to own our own stories and bring the truth into it, then we actually bring our light into the darkness. And we know what happens when we bring our light into the darkness, don't we? The darkness disappears. So when I was looking for some depth in this topic along with Brene Brown and looking towards Ernest Holmes, I found one. Not that it's the only one, but I found one quote on courage. He talks about courage, and what he says about courage is he says, we all need more backbone and less wishbone. We all need more backbone and less wishbone. So he says that there is something which waits only our recognition to spring into being. And by doing that, we bring with it all the power in the universe. You got some backbone? We're going to let go of the wishbone. And so we can't just wish something that it would change. We can't just hope that it'll go away. We have to rumble with it. We sort of have to get in that arena and, like wrestlers. I kept seeing a lot of that when I Googled rumble. Get in that wrestler and pin them down and stare them in the face and say, no, you're not getting back up. I got you now. Now that I got you, I ain't letting you back up until it's like 1, 2, 3, you got it. But we have to rumble with the things in the ring, in the arena. And Brene Brown gives us a brilliant, if you're not inspired by this and being willing to continue this work, which I know many of you are already doing, she says it often takes just one single brave person to change the trajectory of a family and change it big time. So we can choose to be that one brave person that changes the trajectory for our family forevermore. And she also says, by the way, and for any system. And don't we know that there have been one single person coming along to even change a big system? But it takes a brave person to do that. So, this book is so powerful. I'm curious of all you here, how many are reading it with Dr. Petra and I? Okay, how many who aren't are going to go get this book after this talk? Yeah, all right, because you're brave. and this is the third Brene Brown book that we've chosen for our book of the month. There's powerful stuff. I would say this is by far my favorite, Rising Strong. And there's so much content, there's no way she and I can cover it all in the month of June. And so I'm bringing three things forward from all the content on Rumble, and it's a major portion of the book is about Rumble. I brought three things, and I'm going to bring them to light. Three things that can change, if you're willing, to do either one, two, or all three of them, the trajectory of your family. And it begins with you. No matter if the family is this many, or that many. And one is grieve. Two, reflect. And three, open. I just really thought it's cool. It's grow. I know I left the W off, but I think it's cool. We can grow if we're willing to rumble. If we grieve, reflect, and open. So, are you ready? We're going to start with the first one. Take a breath. Let me introduce you to the ideal family. It's a Disney kind of family. It was challenging to find one image that might could touch all of you, but let's just, maybe you find yourself, and when you think about the ideal family in this, it's like Disney. It's like the happiest place on earth, this ideal family. It's like two people are in love, and they're flying high, and they stay on their magic carpet ride, and they got a kid or two or three or four, and everything's great, and everyone in the family loves each other, and they support each other, don't they, in this ideal family? I didn't come from that. Not even close. How many of you didn't come from that? Did not. Most of us. So we've been working with this a while, right? This idea of an ideal family. Well, I had a mother who wasn't there for me. Although I have one sibling and a brother who's close in age, we are anything but close. Not ever been close. And I have to say that there were times in my life and growing up and in my adulthood that when I heard someone that they had a close relationship, with their mother, boy, was I jealous. I remember my childhood friends especially, and then, oh, my sister, my brother, my this, the that, we're so close, we're going here and there, and I'm just like, right? Didn't have it. And sometimes the nature of our family, not even the specifics, but the nature can cause us to go, I didn't have the ideal family. Like, even though, for the most part, my parents, especially one, kept the same job, we moved around, which took me to different school systems for 15 plus years. And so I didn't have I've had this childhood friend for 30 some odd years kind of thing. We were in grade school and grew up, some of you probably had that. So sometimes the nature of our family is not ideal. So in a sentence or a few words, just throw out some more that it didn't make it ideal for you. What? I can't hear you. Was it safe? What? Deaf parents. Step parents. Thank you. I was deaf. Step parents. Oddball. Big brother. Alcoholic. Incest. Workaholic. Rageaholic. Few more for those who have them. What? Constant fighting. Okay. Well, so we see that there are all kinds of makeups, and so we are dealing with this idea of this ideal family. And so now, what the first thing is, and that Brene Brown tells us, it's most important for us who are willing to do and need to do, is to grieve this ideal family. That if we haven't up until now, I invite you after this service. Now, okay, it's fine, but we got to rumble with it. It's to grieve this ideal family. So we need to look it in the face that we didn't have it. Look at it directly. It wasn't for me, right? And actually, wasn't that grieve all the parts of our family that wasn't ideal. Because if we can't heal it if we don't grieve it. We can't heal if we can't grieve. And we know how strong forgiveness is. We can't forgive if we can't grieve. So we can run from grief because loss scares us. Doesn't loss scare you? I don't want to lose certain things. We can run from it, but yet our hearts reach toward grief because the broken parts of us want to mend. C.S. Lewis says, "No one ever told me that grief felt so like fear." So we can't rise strong if we're on the run, and we run from it. And we stay hooked, and we stay triggered, and we stay in patterns because we haven't grieved that we didn't have the ideal family. If we didn't have it, our family of origin, right? Brene Brown gives us some really good indicators as to why perhaps our society, our culture, ourselves as individuals don't grieve. She says, heartbreaks come from the loss of love or the perceived loss of love. And most of us are slow to acknowledge, well, what we're actually feeling is heartbreak. And there are two reasons why. One, we normally associate heartbreak only with romantic love. I'm only heartbroken in a romantic love situation. And that's actually not true, and that limits us and our grief. So it keeps us from fully owning our stories, especially with our family of origin. So one of the greatest heartbreaks of my life that had nothing to do with romantic love is when my parents got divorced and how significantly that shifted the family dynamics and the choices I made, et cetera, et cetera. But that was a very heartbreaking time. I'm not sure I ever fully grieved that. Another time was when I lost my grandmother at an early age. And I lost her first to a stroke. And she lived 4 years after that, and then before passing. So it was heartbreaking that I lost my grandmother. There are other ways in which we have many, many heartbreaks. And sometimes we don't face them. The second reason, she says, is its association with one of the most difficult emotions in the human experience. And that emotion is grief. So if it's challenging or scary or frightening to grieve, there are reasons why. If what I'm experiencing is heartbreak, the grieving is actually inevitable. It comes at some point, especially if we allow it. But grief is perhaps the emotion that we fear the most. So here's what she shares from the book on this and how it relates to our family of origin topic. She says, we may need to bury our expectations or dreams. We may need to relinquish the power that comes from being right or put to rest the idea that we can do what's in our hearts and still retain the support or approval of others. Whatever it is, it all has to go. It isn't good enough to box it up and set it aside. It has to die. It has to be grieved. She says, within families and in other close relationships, we love each other and we hurt each other. The question becomes, what has to end or die so we can experience a rebirth in our relationship? One of my most powerful experiences of forgiveness happened when I finally stopped running from the grief I felt about my family falling apart and started walking towards forgiveness. This process led me to some of the toughest but most important deaths of my life. I had to bury my idealized version of my parents and see them instead as people with struggles and limitations, with their own difficult histories and heartbreaks. The death of the idealized version of our parents, teachers, and mentors, a stage in our hero's journey, is always scary because it means that we're now responsible for our own learning and growth. That death is also beautiful because it makes room for new relationships. So we must grieve the fantasy, if we're still holding one, of having an ideal family. Maybe perhaps not just of our family of origin, but the one we're currently co-creating right now. Grieve it so that there's room for new relationships within it to be bloomed. Let it go, let it die. This is the rumble. And it makes room for new relationships with ourselves and everyone close to us. Okay, so that's one, but we're not done yet. I invite you to take a breath. We're moving into the second. It's from a section that she says, in, you must go. Walking into our story is the reckoning. It can feel dangerous, but in, you must go. So remember, rumble is when we own it. So we got to go in. There's a pivotal scene in The Empire Strikes Back where Yoda is training Luke to be a Jedi warrior, teaching him how to honorably use the Force and how the dark side of the Force, anger, fear, and aggression, can consume him if he doesn't learn how to find calm and inner peace. In this scene, Luke and Yoda are standing in the dark swamp where they've been training with it, and a strange look comes over Luke. He points towards a cave at the base of a giant tree, and looking at Yoda, he says, "There's something not right here. I feel cold. Death." Yoda explains to Luke that the cave is dangerous and strong with the dark side of the Force. Luke looks confused and afraid, but Yoda's response is simply, "In you must go." I know, don't lose my day job. My voice is clear. When Luke asks, "What's in the cave?" Yoda explains, "Only what you take with you." As Luke straps on his weapons, Yoda hauntedly advises, "Your weapons, you will not need them." The cave is dark and thick with vines. Steam eerily rises off the ground with a large snake winding its way over a branch and a prehistoric-looking lizard. The snake, lizard, perches on a limb. As Luke slowly makes his way through the cave, he is confronted by his enemy, Darth Vader. They both draw their lightsabers, and Luke quickly cuts off Vader's helmeted head. The head rolls to the ground, and the face guard blows off the helmet, revealing Vader's face. Only, it isn't Darth Vader's face. It's Luke's face. Luke is staring at his own head in the ground. You see, walking into our stories of hurt is like walking into that cave in Yoda's swamp. It can feel dangerous and foreboding, and what we must ultimately confront is ourselves. The most difficult part of our stories is often what we bring to them. So, it's time, if we so choose. The second thing we can choose to take up is to reflect, is to begin to have reflection and to start on the way we start to rumble in this process with our family of origin is we start to reflect on those things that trigger you, upset you the most about your family of origin. Anybody got any? That make you crazy. So, did you ever think growing up about your parents like, "I'll never be like her or him. When I get married, for sure, I'm not going to do that," right? I would never treat someone like that. Or, scenario, because we've had it. When I have kids, by goodness, right? I'm not going to participate in that, what I saw in my family. Well, and when we see it, not just with our family of origin, but when people in our lives, whether we know them or not, and it triggers us, it upsets us the most, and we say, "I don't want to be like them," especially our family of origin, that's the place to start, because there may be a habit, may be a pattern, there may be a way in which, whether we knew it or not, we took them up. At least one, perhaps, and then we get to stare ourselves in the face and in the mirror. Yeah. So, I've been rumbling with myself for several years now about this, and I have to admit, for a long time, I wasn't willing to do this kind of work. I wasn't willing when someone would tell me, "You're showing up like this," and it sounded very familiar. I just wasn't willing. I projected everything on that person and was like, "Well, that must be them. That's not me." Until you hear it a time or two or three or 200. And then I was like, maybe I ought to start looking at this. And so for the past several years, I started looking at it because probably I put it off because I was honestly afraid of what I would find. I didn't want to go into the cave. I was afraid that I might be in there. And I might look like somebody else that I don't like. I might show up like somebody else I don't appreciate how they show up. And so for me, the things that really triggered me and that I didn't like were things like manipulating, controlling. No matter how you do something, they know a better way to do it. And that's the way to do it. And this one was really hard for me to look at. And by the way the person shows up, the world revolves around me. And so we began to work on these. I'm sure you have your list, right? Some may feel like boulders, and so you're willing to tackle the boulders. Some might be more subtle, like really subtle. It gets so subtle that instead of it's boulder, it's a grain of sand. And as I've started to work on this, just when I think I'm done, ha ha, laugh, laugh, I find more things, and they're subtle. Manipulation. Big boulders, I can tell when someone's trying to manipulate, or honestly, when I'm attempting to manipulate. But I've gotten really good sometimes at the subtle manipulation. Like, would you like a cup of coffee? Come on, don't you want a cup of coffee? I know you want a cup of coffee. Starbucks is just around the corner. When actually I'm the one who wants the coffee. In preparing for this, I had to look at myself once again. This was years ago. I'm like, do you know, I'm admitting it. I had to admit it to myself first. That there was a time where I manipulated, and I know that my partner didn't really want to at the time, to buy $1 million house in California, because guess who wanted it? But it became their idea. These are hard things to look at least for me. And so I've now started to notice the grains of sand because they're subtle. Brene Brown talks about this. And she talks about this in a way in the book that really sparked something in me. And especially some of you know, because you were here earlier in the year, I let go of my story. And I did. And letting go of that story, what I didn't understand was going to happen is then I no longer could project this on that person. And as I distance myself, and that person's not around as much, I really can't project it and like, well, that's them, that's them, that's them. I've had to start doing more of this, more of this, more of this. I've had to go into the cave and rumble with myself. And recently, I came upon one that just got so big of a trigger, and how I showed up, I'm embarrassed to say, but I'm going to share with you. It was the hardest thing I had to face, and one of the things about me. Something that I've lived with myself for quite some time. But I was so triggered, I'm like, I'm not triggered like this about other things. So after reading her story, I went, So, as many of you know, recently, Peter and I we downsized and moved into this lovely little condo, this nest, we call it. And we love the nest. And as we were moving into it, it was just so perfect. It was in the spring. It was a few months ago. And you know, it's springtime and the windows are open and we're starting to put our furniture in place. And I am so happy and everything's just perfect, really. I'm so glad we decided to do this. And the windows were open. And I smelled cigarette smoke. Now, okay, that happens a lot, right? But I get triggered with cigarette smoke. And it was close by, so I thought it must have been those construction workers that actually asked, because I'd already had the conversation, please don't smoke in the back because I'm allergic to cigarette smoke and it affects me, and the world revolves around me, by the way, and it affects me and it makes me nauseous and the this and the that, and, you know, so please don't do that. Well, smoke, and finally I went, I was feeling the trigger and the rage that was starting to happen inside of me and Peter didn't even know. I snuck out the door to go see who this was. 2 doors down, out on their patio, in the sanctity of their own home, there was a woman smoking. I was furious. I'm admitting this live with you and on Memorex. I mean, I was in pure judgment. Hadn't happened before, wink, wink. I was in pure judgment and I was enraged that this perfect home had just got obliterated. You see, there have been moments, and even with staff in the past, that I say, I'm allergic to smoke, I can't really hug you, okay? Just to let you know, right? I've been in Paris, France, and have to leave a great meal because but But on this particular day, it went beyond. It went to a new level. And I could see the rage in me, and I was in the cave. And I looked me right in the face, and I went, who is this person? Oh my God. And I decided, I have to do something. I have to rumble with me, because something in my family of origin has triggered this so big that now I'm like this. I'm a maniac. And so I started doing some processes and getting some help and working with myself. And what really, the heartbreaking moment for me about me within myself was when I imagined, as a spiritual leader, talking to you, if you were coming to me with this, what I would say is, well, that person is God too. And I realized from a spiritual perspective, I was eliminating a whole group of people and wasn't willing to love them because of me and my triggers. And I did look up that there are approximately 36.5 million smokers in the United States. It's probably good that I don't try to control you or manipulate you or attempt to get you to give it up. But what happened in this process, because I was intentional and I was willing to work with me on it, is there came a new unconscious thought. Never happened before this moment, because I wanted this. I wanted to find the other side of this. And that new unconscious thought was, I love and support smokers. And I can tell you it's been almost 2 months now. And every time anyone, I want any of you smokers in the community to hug me today. Anytime anybody lights up now, that's the thought. I love and support smokers. I am no longer nauseous. I have no longer physical reactions. I am hugging people I wouldn't have hugged before. I had great meals on vacation. I didn't have to leave the premises. And it's all because I was willing to work with something that I was so triggered about my family of origin. And it changed everything within me and everyone around me. And I no longer have judgment at all about that. I share that because, one, I had to admit, and it's true. So, Ernest Holmes tells us this is so important. And this is a big signal for us that most of our criticism of others comes from an unconscious rejection of the self. And so, when we start with our triggers and we start with our judgments and we start with these things to help us, especially with our family of origin, I was rejecting myself at a level, and that was also causing the increase in the rage and the triggers. And so, have you ever noticed that when judgment comes out, like when I'm unhappy with my weight and where I am in my physical body, I promise you, I'm looking at people and going, well, they're overweight. Why don't they take better care of themselves? I'm judging because where is it really starting? I'm unhappy with something about me. So I'm more likely to judge people when I'm unhappy with something in my life. And so that's one of the profound indicators that may be a new one for you now, that something's going on and we need to reflect upon it and rumble with it. Brene Brown tells us we don't judge people when we feel good about ourselves. And when I now, having read this and worked with this material so I could bring it to you, I reflect back on that moment when I hit the rage at a new level and a trigger that was just so ugly that I didn't know who she was. And I wasn't happy with myself. And there I was having massive judgment, more so than I normally did. Okay, take a breath. That's number 2. Because we're not done yet. We got one more to go. So perhaps this is one for you. I'd like for you to bring someone into your mind and your heart. I want you to think of someone. Especially start with, and try to start with, someone from your family of origin. Living or not, it's okay. Who fills you, when you think of them, with some sort of resentment, frustration, disappointment, makes you angry, or when you think about them, you just feel yourself closing down and getting tight. Just bring that person into the forefront of you right now. If it's not a person that's family of origin, move outside that ring and find someone. So I imagine we all have at least one. So the third thing, if we're willing, that is the rumble for us, is to open. Is to open. And open up to the truth. If you absolutely knew, if God, Spirit, life itself was telling you, this is the truth, and you believed it about this person, and the truth is, this person is doing the best he or she can. Open to that. You see, in the story she shares, Renee does, that helped me see mine. It sent her into a rage and got her triggered, and she went into see her therapist, yada, yada. But from that moment on, for a couple of weeks, she was just triggered. And so she started to ask a question of about 200 people. And she asked the question, do you think that in general, people are doing the best they can? And she got mostly yes. Sometimes she got no and got to have a good conversation. And finally, she got to her husband, Steve, and she asked him, honey, do you think that in general, people are doing the best they can? And he said, well, I feel it's better to assume that people are doing their best. It keeps me out of judgment and lets me focus on what is and not what could be. And so, one invitation for us to look at and to rumble with is to open so that we can stop loving people for who they could be and start loving them for who they are. Take a breath. We've gotten through all three. So, my invitation to you, each of you, is to be willing to rumble with one or all or some of these three things, or perhaps things you're already working on with your family of origin. Rumble, continue. Don't give up till you got it pinned down in the arena, staring it in the face. You're allowing yourself, as it relates to that, whatever you thought your family ought to be in the past or now, that you allow yourself to grieve that it's not that. Some of us need to grieve that it's not ever going to be that, and that's okay. But regardless, if there's something else we want and not what we have, grieve it, like she says. Let it die, so that there's this new opening for new relationships to be born. To reflect, to absolutely reflect on the things, and we know because they happen, they come up, that trigger us, that puts us into judgment, that gets us all wound up inside, and start working on that. Is there any of me in that? Is anything about that I'm triggered about, true about me? and to open, just absolutely open to the possibility and open perhaps to the truth. The truth is, no matter what, they have done or are doing the very best that they can. And when we take that into our hearts, that changes. So it absolutely begins in the rumble. We get to remember. It only takes just one single brave person. And I know you're that person. To change the trajectory of the family. Because you know what? All those lineage back there, they didn't have Brene Brown's book and CSLDallas and the time now that we're in our own life where we're willing to rumble. And so for the sake of the trajectory going forward, we can set a new course. We can go from fantasy to freedom for ourselves, for all those in our families. That's a real blessing.
So this invites me now to take that in. Go within with me as we move into prayer. And so we take that breath, that centering breath that moves us in and down into that infinite reality within us. It is here in the sanctuary of our heart, in the privacy of our own soul, that we touch that infinite reality, the mystery of life. And as we breathe into that place, we breathe into the infinite divine presence. Life, love, joy, peace, beauty. The power of God, the presence of love, the wellspring of creation. And that life which is moving the universe is moving us right here, right now. My life and your life. The life of all beings everywhere. The life of all people. And so we take this moment right here to affirm that this is in fact true. That this life is the life that runs through you and me, that runs through the families from which we come, and the people we love today. And as we know this truth, let us affirm this morning that we bring our light, not our darkness. That we have the courage and the strength to confront what needs to be confronted, to release what needs to be released. So that our light shines brightly. That we are a beacon of love and a place of hope and a joyous presence in the world. This morning we affirm and declare that we release these old patterns, these false beliefs, and we cut the chains that bind us to the past. Standing right here, right now, in this place together, we move forward with grace and with the truth that not only is each and every person in life doing the best that they can, but right now I know that the truth is each one of us is doing that best. And that is the light in the world. It blesses and heals, it touches and lifts. How good it is to know this with gratitude. We let it be. We let it go. And so it is.